And now we take a look at the Sunday papers. And for this, I'm joined by author and political commentator Eusebius Mckaiser, who's doubling up for me today, as well as Vuyo Mvoko, the political editor of eNCA. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you so very much. Given that you're making your first appearance on my show, Mr. Mvoko, I'm going to start with you. We've got the City Press who's saying Mabuza is back as deputy, and then we've got another story that says the cat has cornered Cyril, and the cat, of course, is Mr. Mabuza. Which story do you think has the best facts to back up what they are saying?
Well, you and I had a conversation yesterday afternoon, immediately after our broadcast at Loftus Versfeld, and told about the clamor of all these influencers, very real influencers within the ANC, who were trying to spin what has been going on over the past few days. And one thing looks certain. It is that Didi Mabuza is back. Now, whether in other words, the integrity won't find anything that state law enforcement agencies have been able to unearth up until.
And we know that he has.
That's exactly what he has essentially said to all and sundry. But what he wanted to, what would have been his single biggest achievement after all of this, is that he would have managed to get a structure of the ANC to say we concur or we've found nothing against this person. So and that is something he wants to use going forward.
So if we take Vuyo's logic, has Didi Mabuza set a trap for Ace Magashule, Eusebius Mckaiser?
Well, that's a really good question, Karima, and I think one has to analyze this. Both stories, by the way, for me are, and I respect both newspapers, they don't get us very far. All they really tell us is that the dude said to the Integrity Commission, I'd like to be able to make representation in legal speak. But if we take the vantage point of Didi for a second and leave the president out of it, the dilemma for Didi is how best do you maximize your prospects of one day becoming president of the country, stealing, looting, and keeping out of jail? Is it by being inside the state, or is it actually by returning to your base in Mpumalanga, but also now being in charge of Lutulia's, where you're going to have to jostle with Ace Magashule, by the way, and their relationship has changed, as we all know, over the last 2 years. And I think for me that question isn't settled by either of these two front-page stories today. And I think in that regard it is a difficulty for Ace, because we all ask, what does this mean for the president? And as Asanda so wonderfully put, do you keep an enemy close to you? But the question for Ace is also, where the hell do I want Didi? Is Didi going to be useful to me actually inside the party, or also at arm's length? And it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Now, the interesting story, of course, is the question of the Integrity Committee of the African National Congress.
Which now, I think both stories kind of don't interrogate.
Exactly.
Because what these stories expose is the reality that you have these structures, and specifically we're talking about the Integrity Committee, that are meant to address things that are missing within the ANC. And in this instance, it is actually the integrity of many leaders. But it is unable to do that, even with the best intentions, and even under a president who has come out to say, this is what we stand for, this is what we don't want going forward. But inherent in its approach is a very serious limitation. Where do they go? I mean, if they do not have any further evidence beyond what state law enforcement agencies have.
It's not about the Integrity Commission at all. It's about the NEC. And if you're a political reporter following the story, and I was your editor, I would say to you, go back to what we used to do before Integrity Commission rolled off our tongues, Karima, which is to do the bean counting inside the NEC. Because ultimately, the Integrity Commission, as we know, is subservient to the NEC's authority.
Absolutely.
In fact, not only that, to the manipulations of those who are in charge, which is a point we touched on earlier, because for the Integrity Commission committee to work, it has to rely heavily on the infrastructure that Ace Magashule and Jesse Duarte are in charge of.
And there's a lot of rumors that
manipulation now.
Exactly,
that the names were actually forwarded to the committee. Look at these names.
Yeah. The point that I want to bring in, of course, is the fact that Shamila Batohi chose Friday, the day before the inauguration, to roll out her armory to come after corruption. And a lot of people were saying, but why is she doing this? The Zondo Commission isn't finished. And the one has nothing to do with the other, quite frankly. I mean, the Zondo Commission is an inquiry that looks at state capture, but it is not a replacement for what law enforcement agencies need to do. Do you think that the timing on Friday, Eusebius, of Shamila Batohi's decision to roll out, what she's got in her armory and to, in fact, acknowledge that they're going to get accused of acting politically, but they are going to consider the law in front of them, and the law is going to decide who is going to, be on the wrong side of it?
It's such an hilarious question because, of course, many people in relation to the debate about the PP are about to will defend her in the same vein which I'm about to defend the head of the NPA, which is to say the show must go on. The reality is that even as you are getting ready for dignitaries from around the world to fly into your country, governance continues. An NPA that is apolitical can't worry about what is happening in terms of a post-election celebration and inauguration. It doesn't matter. So I quite frankly think it's an excellent thing, and I understand, and I think the editors made the right choice. I wouldn't criticize them for the choice. But I read the papers closely this morning, and the story of her presser is buried in the papers. But in a sense, it is absolutely critical to restoring the integrity of the state.
Absolutely. And I think, on that note, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and continue this conversation. But I want to talk specifically about the fact that very little is actually said about the cleanup of one of the arms of government that have been completely politicized, which is, of course, our criminal justice system.